Valerian released the Vision Master Pro 2 not that long ago. However, now they are back with the follow-up and the flagship model, the Vision Master Max. The Max is launching at $5,000 in the US MSRP, and it brings a bump in brightness up to 3500 ISO lumens. The Max has a motorized lens for zoom as well as shift with a built-in throw ratio of 0.9 to 1.5 to 1, or with an optional add-on lens that's coming later, you can increase that to 2.0 to 1. With the adjustable iris, if you have extra brightness to spare for your setup, you can close down the iris to increase the contrast performance. The Vision Master Max supports every available HDR format, so Dolby Vision, HDR10+, HDR10, has dynamic tone mapping for HDR10, also supports DTS for audio as well as Dolby. It still retains active 3D support, it has low input lag for gaming, it even has a 1 gigabit per second Ethernet, so pretty much any kind of option or feature that you'd be looking for, it has. When it comes to installation or setup, it does have auto keystone correction, though it would be better if you don't use keystone, or you can adjust it manually. And one of the biggest additions to the Max is a new feature that will virtually eliminate any rainbow effect or RBE that you might see with a typical DLP projector. Valerian is rating the Vision Master Max with a native contrast of 5,000 to 1 and a 50,000 what they call viewing contrast, or what you can consider dynamic contrast, between the adjustable iris and the EBL or enhanced black level setting, giving the Max a very great overall contrast regardless of the type of scene. Valerian says you can use the Vision Master Max on a screen up to 300 inches in size. However, you should expect a more reasonable, say 120 to 160 inch size in order to have enough brightness for HDR content. I did what many of you are going to do and just threw it up on my wall, about 130 inches in size, and just started watching. So I'm going to go through some of the settings. So in HDR, you have a variety of different picture modes, from vivid to standard, sports, filmmaker, and an IMAX enhanced, where I'm going to be using filmmaker. And then in Dolby Vision, you have bright, dark, and custom, where I would use Dolby Vision Dark. I use those modes for accuracy, however, you can use whichever you like based on your preferences, but I'm going to go through some of the other settings that are available and to give you a look at the menu and where they are. The Max is using Google TV OS, which is my preferred OS for smart TVs and projectors, so if you've used any others, you're going to be feeling pretty much right at home, as it's not too different than any others. Under the General Settings tab, you can set it to adjust the content type based on if it has filmmaker or IMAX detection, the type of content that you're watching. We can also adjust the laser luminance in 10 different levels. Under that is the enhanced black level setting, which can be off, low, or high. That's really only going to be noticeable in darker scenes. There's an active contrast, which is like the typical dynamic contrast setting that you generally would want to leave off for accuracy. You can see it makes quite a visual difference, and that's up to you if you would want to use that. The brightness enhancer, I really don't see too many people wanting to use, but it's there. It will really shift the image very blue or very green, which technically makes it a bit brighter, but it's what I would consider an unusable brightness, just with that massive of a shift. And with how just generally bright the Vision Master Max is, it seems unlikely that you would need to do that anyway. Under the color menu, you have Warm 1, Warm 2, Standard, and Cool, and Warm 1 is actually warmer than Warm 2, so depending on what displays you're used to, that might be backwards. But Warm 1 is the default, more accurate setting. Then under color space, you can select between the 709, P3, 2020 gamuts, as well as just leaving it on auto, which it does select the correct gamut when it's on auto. Then there's a dynamic color enhancer, which is just going to kind of oversaturate and boost color saturation a bit. Under clarity, you have sharpness, which should be at 0, but if you like the added edge enhancement, then that's up to you. I would leave smooth gradient off, as there really isn't any posterization issues that I've seen. Super resolution is on by default. That's going to be another one up to you. Noise reduction I would leave off, anything that's going to reduce detail. And then you have the motion settings. So film is going to give you 24p playback with movies, whereas off is going to have 3:2 pull down. And then anything higher than film is going to add motion interpolation, which is a personal preference and will be up to you. Then there's a calibration menu with what they call color tuner that has your primaries and secondaries, as well as a flesh tone option with 3 points of control. And then we have the 2-point and 20-point white balance controls. And then we also have a 20-point gamma control specifically for luminance adjustment. And the 20 points are just as expected in 5% increments. I would not suggest making any changes to any of these settings without the proper equipment and measurement ability, especially in a projection setup, which is going to have 3 aspects between the projector, the screen, and the room itself that can affect the color image quality. Now in HDR10, you do have dynamic tone mapping with the Vision Master Max, and we can see here, especially in bright content, how much of a difference it really makes at retaining detail, and I would strongly suggest leaving it on. So I'm viewing Jennifer Gala's content on YouTube to really stress out the tone mapping ability of the Vision Master Max, and it is able to retain detail very well and also still provide a bright enough image that, so the recording of this was in the evening time, and again, it's just on my wall, there's no screen, so this could look much better in a dark room with an actual screen. But even still, like just on the wall, it looked great, and I have it right next to my Sony Bravia 8 Mark II, so in a few moments I will switch over the camera angle and can show it in comparison with a 65-inch OLED TV. And while there are people who are going to get this projector to use in a dedicated theater room, the main purpose of these types of projectors is to just be able to quickly and easily set it up, throw it on the wall, or maybe have a pull-down screen, in a living space, whether it's a living room or family room, that you can also have a television in as well, and be able to use whichever device you want to use depending on what you're viewing and what time you're viewing it. So even in this scenario where the room is not dark and it's just going on the wall, the Max still looks great, is plenty bright enough. I can even have the kitchen light on in an open floor plan room off to the side and still be able to see the image perfectly fine. While I do have a dedicated basement room that I could test this with a screen, I wanted to instead test it in a more realistic real world type setting where I think most people are going to use it. Like I said, in a living room or large family room or something where they can just throw up a big image on the wall, watch a movie, play games, let their kids have some fun with a big screen experience at home. So I just threw it on the biggest wall that I had available to me, which also happens to be the wall right next to where my TV is, which again is a 65-inch Sony Bravia 8 Mark II, which is a QD OLED. And while the contrast is not going to come close to that, especially just on the wall in a big white room, however, the brightness is actually surprisingly really good, and also other performance areas. So let's take a look now. With obviously the TV on the left and the projector on the right, see the black level, big difference as expected. However, the shadow detail is surprisingly similar. So as I way overexpose the camera here on this very dark scene, you can see pretty much the same level of shadow detail on the Valerian as there is on the Bravia 8 Mark II. So again, if this was in a dedicated theater room with an actual screen, it would look a lot better. And then when it comes to anything with color or general scenes, it looks really, really good and a lot like just a bigger TV. And at 130 inches, it is exactly 4 times the size of that 65-inch Sony. So this is a scenario where you can ask yourself, do you want to give up a little bit of overall performance and contrast for a size difference that is, like I said, literally 4 times the size or bigger? You could have a bigger wall than what I have available here and go for that immersion. So right now I'm back to using Jennifer Gala's content on her channel on YouTube, which is really going to stress the overall brightness abilities of each display. However, in most movie and TV content, which is much more conservatively graded, the brightness differences would be very, very similar. There would basically not be any most of the time. Whereas 100% of the time, there would be a massive screen size difference and a higher level of immersion coming from the projector. So that is a preference choice for you to make. This is why I think it makes sense for a lot of people to have a dual setup like this, where you can have the TV for certain situations or certain content, and then the Valerian Max, especially if you could pair it with a screen, whether it's a white screen or ALR screen, whatever works for your room. It really opens up a lot of flexibility depending on your own preferences and what you want to get out of your experience from different kinds of content. All right, then I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.